so dedicated to the research, the philosophy, the art, the actual art of transmutation, both physically in the medicines that he creates, as well as energetically in the transmutation of our reality. So this is seriously massive that you made it out here and you were able to share with us. So it's my honor, my pleasure to introduce you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. That was wonderful. Let's hear it for them, man. Thank you so much. I got a couple of notes here because, man, I haven't slept very much. So I'm going to read some notes off. But for the past several years, I have been focusing a lot on a big shift in my reality, something that has shown up totally out of left field. I did not see this coming. I had studied business since I was 14. I'm like a pattern recognition systems mind, and I built, an entire empire at times in my life off of this one skill of seeing patterns. And throughout history, a lot of people have felt the same way. They look at nature, especially, to see what patterns they should model. And these people were the alchemists. Before they were using these tools to change things from one thing into another, or to extract medicines and make medicines, or take metals and, you might say, transmute them. Before they were doing all of this, they were just trying to understand themselves. And ultimately, alchemy is your inner process, but also the way you express that inner process in the world around you. It's also a lab process. I mean, all of the original alchemy books were actually recipe books for how to make stuff. Some of them were, and then some of them were also just purely spiritual. So today I'd like to talk about what alchemy is. I'd like to talk about how it's also inside of the concept of alchemy is the guide for you to use your own spiritual growth as a way for you to connect with nature and a way for you to connect nature to your spiritual growth. We've all seen a seed grow into a plant, and it's a really beautiful thing, or a flower open is a very beautiful thing. Beauty, we know, inherently has some relevance to us. When we see these things happen, we feel a connection to this. When we see seeds open and when we see something pushed to the ground, it's like, especially if you've ever seen a fast motion, video of some seed growing, you're like, wow, that is gorgeous. Or if you've ever had a child and you've seen the child be born, it's just, you cry and it's beautiful. This is all nature showing you who you are. Ultimately, you can see your reflection in nature, and you can guide yourself by looking at the way that nature guides itself. And that's what alchemy is. Alchemy originally is the relationship between consciousness and matter. We also have another name for this now, which is manifestation. This is what alchemy has come into. Half of alchemy became the spiritual aspect, manifestation, and the other half became sciences, like biology, for example. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about both of them. I'm going to also kind of use this as an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects of all time, the Philosopher's Stone, which is just mind-blowing and is, I'll dive into it. So originally, if you look at what biology is complex molecules interacting with each other, and at the center of that is consciousness. Some kind of conscious experiencer is experiencing the thing, and then as a result of that, everything is perfect. You have these concepts of entropy and entropy in life. Entropy is where, as you become more complex, you become less stable, and you start to fall apart. This is what the pervading theory right now is in the scientific world, is that eventually you get so complex that you erupt into a disorder. However, there is a way for you to create order as you increase complexity, and this is called entropy. Have you guys I'm not sure if you've ever done this before, but a really great example of this is whenever you're boiling water and you're turning up the water heat on the water very, very slowly. And as you turn it up a little bit at a time, you can get the water to a temperature above boil, even though it's not boiling. And then you might take a spoon and stick it in to stir it, and it just erupts into a boil. That's because if you turn up the volume on something slow enough, you give the entire system time to adjust. And as you do that, it can actually hold the complexity, and it won't erupt into disorder. But as soon as you take that perfect system and disorder it, interrupt it with something, in this case maybe a spoon or adding more water or salt or something that you add to it, it explodes into a boil. So think about that as syntropy. Syntropy is an expression of you turning up the heat slowly so that these natural eddies can start to be produced. And in water, you get these little whirlpools that then start to push out heat. And they release the heat through the whirlpool instead of forcing it into the system. This is a metaphor for us as a culture as well. You can't make a massive shift in a culture all at one time without disruption. You have to turn it up slightly and slightly and slightly until we've transferred from one concept state of mind into another. And that's essentially the basis for the concept behind the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is, at its core, I'll tell you the two sides of it. It is, in a physical sense, an actual physical thing that's been written about. It's very weird to have hundreds and hundreds of books, if not thousands of books written about something, recipes on how to make it, things like this, and then for it not to be real. I'm not saying that I've made it. I'm not saying that it's possible to make it. I don't know. But it has been written about since times of antiquity. Seriously. This is over 10,000 years old. This stuff, the earliest writings are about this. And all of the religious texts that we now follow or we grew up with, let's say, that we now transfer into our own spiritual perspectives, a lot of these came from this idea that we can perfect our spirit. And this is the metaphor of the stone. So I'm going to tell you basically what the stone is, so we can clear that up, and you guys know what that is. There is a way to make it physically that I can talk to you about. I'll go into that more in depth. I have a talk here at 7 o'clock this evening, so if you guys want to learn more about it, then you can come then. And but for now, I'll go into the two different aspects of it. The most important thing I think first is to look at what the Philosopher's Stone was said to do. It was said to make the taker of the Philosopher's Stone, or the maker of the stone, immortal, first off. It was the Elixir of Immortality. So it was it would give to you nutrients somehow, right? We didn't know how because we didn't have the kind of tech that we have now to look at stuff. But it was said to give your body constant sustenance, also to transfer all of the corruption in your body into purity, and also to transfer the corruption of the spirit or the mind into purity. And I believe that this is the point of manifestation and the point of spirituality, personally. And I believe also that if you model the way the stone is made and you make it into a spiritual practice, that you will be brought closer to these things. You'll be brought closer to your immortal nature, which we all have at the center of us. We all know deep down that when you die, you don't die. We all know this. But being here and living and being wrapped up in this world can accumulate so much. Being connected to so many different people, loving and having empathy for so many different people, it's easy to lose who you are in a crowd. And this can be difficult for spirituality. So as we model the stone and as I start to speak about what it is, I really want you to look at yourself and your own spiritual growth and see if you can overlap it over top of this and see if you can glean something from it. I won't teach you anything personally. I think that nature has everything that you need to know. You don't need someone else to tell you. However, I want to point as best I can at the right place to look so that you can see, make an easy job of it, if possible. It's a really difficult thing going through an awakening, going through a spiritual clearing, or going through the arduous journey of integration, of trying just to understand who you are and what you're supposed to do here. So to kind of smooth things over, let's go into the stone and what it is physically and what the alchemists believe the physical represented in the spirit. As far as the alchemists are concerned, they had a fascination with the metals. They called it the semen of the gods, which technically is the case because it all comes from the stars. No metals are made in the earth, period. All of the metals are made in stars. They die, they explode, they shoot out across the universe, and then they impregnate these different planets. And when the planets have metals in them, they have what's needed for life. This is crazy to think about because, we're not made of metal, right? But yeah, you are. You have potassium and magnesium and sodium. You have so many different metals in the body. You have an essential mineral need, but you also have metals that stay in the body, and you use them. And you use them as catalysts more than anything, meaning that they have a curious property that they can spin faster as atoms than any other atoms can spin. It's a very strange quality. And when they do this, they allow energy to be lent to other things around them. Think about yourself now as a metal. if you are spinning fast, if you have extra energy, spiritual energy, if you're going through the heat, whenever heat touches a subject or an object, it increases the wobble. It makes all the atoms bump together, and that's how you get heat, right? They bump together, and it makes heat happen. Well, they're bumping together because they're spinning so fast, they're wobbling, and then they hit each other as a result. Heat is a transfer of spin. It's a transfer of spinning of the atoms. So I want you to look at heat also from a spiritual perspective as the truth, because that's what fire always represented in alchemy, truth. So now we're going to look at the spiritual aspect of the metals and the spiritual aspect of fire and what happens whenever you put fire to a metal slowly, and how the stone, the perfected form of your soul, can be made within you and also hopefully help you understand nature a little bit better and feel connected to everything around you, which is your divine birthright here as a human. The metals were seen by the alchemists to have stages. I can't verify this. This is just all the old books are written like this, so I'll explain it this way. Lead was the base metal. You've always probably heard this before. And gold was the elevated metal, the pure metal. And it was said that your job here as an alchemist, as a human, was to transfer your base elements, the corrupted elements, into these purified forms. So if you take most metals, whenever you start to heat them up, they have a melting temperature. They basically will not separate from each other whenever you put them together. It's very difficult to get them to separate. Gold especially. If you look at gold under a microscope, a really powerful microscope, you can see that when it separates, it automatically grabs back together again. And this is how we are as people. We love to be in connection. And it's very difficult for us to go through spiritual journey while we're entertaining the spiritual journeys of others. We can say that their spiritual journey for us is a reflection, but when we start to take on their energy, it's very difficult for us then to put all of our focus on ourselves for our own spiritual journey. So the first step of making the Philosopher's Stone is to take gold, which is for you already the perfect form of your personality, you might say. This like higher element, your intuition, your higher self. It was also associated with the crown chakra. All the metals were associated with different chakras. So you take gold, which is already the most beautiful element, most beautiful metal to all of the alchemists, and you rip it apart, atom by atom, so that it's one atom alone. This is important because that's how it feels whenever you go through a spiritual journey. The first thing that happens is you realize you're separate from everything else. The separation seems real to you, and everyone else seems fake to you. And it can be really disheartening and really scary. The thing that does that, the heat that does that, is the truth for you. You start to need to know what the truth is. And if you don't know what the truth is, you feel like you can't continue. You can't make decisions in life because you can't base your life on any decision, base any of your decisions on any truth unless you know what is actually going on here. It's all speculation and belief. So the first step from the stone is to take gold and to rip it apart atom by atom, and then to keep it apart while it's increased, the energy is increased and increased. You do that with heat. It takes 9 months, the same amount of time that it takes to make a baby. You start with the temperature of the womb. It's a very interesting process. You take gold. The old way was to take gold, a certain kind of gold, which is gold that's already been separated as much as possible. White powder gold, you probably have heard of that before. Some of you may have heard of it. Also known as ormus. But ormus that we buy now is actually Dead Sea salt, magnesium mostly, magnesium hydroxide, milk of magnesia. The old ormus stood for something, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, orme. And what this is trying to say is that when you get an element, a metal, into a single atom state, you can increase its spin speed faster than you can if it's in a group. You can get it spinning so fast, in fact, that nothing else can bond to it anymore. It becomes chemically inert, even to itself. Gold, if you take it and break it apart and then you put it with other gold again, it instantly makes dust, instantly connects again, and drops out as a metal. But if you can increase the spin speed of a gold, if you can expose yourself to truth while you are still in separation from your peers in life, so painful, isn't it? So painful to do this. But if you can do this, eventually you can't make that chemical bond the same way you were before. You become sovereign. And as the metal for the stone goes through these phases, it starts to change colors. It's changing colors because light refracts at a different speed whenever things are spinning at different speeds, and that makes different colors, right? That's why when we see stuff, we see brown or green or whatever, because these different light frequencies that when they bounce off, only a certain frequency bounces back off to the eye, and that's why it looks to be that color. So the stone actually goes through all these phases. It's called the peacock's tail, or it has a ton of names for all these different phases. And you see it go through the rainbow of colors, and then it ends in a white color. And when it gets to a white color, it's said to be called the white stone. The white stone is you, perfected, alone, without help. This is not the end, but it is a major, major accomplishment in life. If anyone here has ever gone through a spiritual awakening, we good? Okay. If anyone here has ever gone through a spiritual awakening, you know how rough it can be on yourself. But eventually, the stone begins to turn blood red. This is you. This is very interesting because technically what happens when you do this in the lab is that you're taking gold and it's spinning so fast nothing else can connect to it. And then it finds another gold atom that's spinning so fast nothing else can connect to it in the dark and starts to dance around it without bonding. This is called Diatomic Gold. It is the red philosopher's stone. It is your ultimate divine state. Technically speaking, spiritually speaking, you are so perfect as you are, perfect as you are. Over time, we build up all of this belief and dross in our lives. And we have to remove this constantly in life. The thing that I want to impart onto you now, that the stone imparted onto me, that really changed my life, is that it's possible for you to make a transition spiritually where chemical bonding isn't the thing that keeps you alive anymore. It isn't the thing that gives your life meaning. That instead, the truth is acting in your life at such a central component that you're totally unwilling to compromise on that truth. That you'll find another person that bonds in exactly the same way that you do. Your tribe will show up this way, and you can't find your tribe unless you are expressing this divine nature. I'm still working on this. I'm by no means like there, you know. I've gone through a lot of painful experiences myself, like we all have. However, I have seen in this path of turning up the heat as a major, major guiding force for me. And it's opened the door for me to see nature and it's all of its workings as a true reflection of my life. And I would just love to share that with you all. I have plenty of beautiful extractions I've made that have been built on these concepts that are almost holy in the experience of taking them. If you show up around 7 o'clock, I'll have some. Come and join me. Come experience them with me. I'll answer any questions you have about alchemy. This has been my whole life for years, and I'm such a nerd about it. So if you want to nerd out with me, come back here at 7 o'clock. I'll be right over here, and we'll dive deeper into alchemy. I'll answer all your questions, and we'll share some of these ancient elixirs together, and you can see how it makes you feel and see for yourself whether or not you feel drawn to this path. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you. You're great, brother.